Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas, and I'm delighted to be welcoming someone whose achievements make us look at him with pride for being Indian Americans. Starting from IIT Mumbai to MBA at Tulane University, member of Business School Council, many achievements, and he founded and he's managing partner of Geosphere Capital Management, which is a global long short equity hedge fund. But in addition to his professional excellence, his philanthropic orientation kept him active with Pratham USA, and as former chairman, he not only knows about Indian education system, he is very well versed with Indian economy, and we are talking about both of them. But first, let me have the pleasure of welcoming uh, Arvind Sangarji. Arvindji, namaste, welcome.
Namaste. Thank you.
So, so let me request you by diving into your past, and most of the time, getting into IIT is a big deal. Um, and then when you come out, what is it that made you switch from engineering to finance?
Interestingly, even when I was in IIT, which is, like if you're growing up middle class in India, your parents encourage you that if you can, you either go to medical school or you go to engineering. So I liked medicine less than I liked engineering, so I chose engineering at that time. But my interest, even while doing engineering, was more in economics. We had some courses in that, and that was an area that I was actually interested even in. Before going to IIT, I was doing some economic courses, and I really liked that. And so I decided that the natural progression. I did work for 1 year in India in computer marketing and sales for what was then the very nascent computer industry developing. But I came to the U.S. to do an MBA and very quickly realized that finance and numbers and everything associated with that was something that it had elements of engineering and finance, but it was more of my passion than engineering was.
So I'll stay here just for a little bit because I know quite a few individuals who either after having done PhD in mathematics or like you coming from IIT background gets into finance, and somewhere as we grow, especially during our formative years, we want to do something which should make an impact, which would empower us to bring about some positive change in the world. So of course, as an engineer you are in a position to do that, but also as someone in finances also you are doing that. Just an imaginary question for you as an individual, which is more exciting? You see the role that engineers are playing, and especially in the world where artificial intelligence has also started playing, and we go from mechanical civil to electronic and to computer professional. So just a broad
Yeah,
question.
well, look, I was a chemical engineer. So, chemical engineering is still important when we are seeing this energy transition. A lot of the battery chemistry that is involved in new batteries to make cars more efficient and more easily able to switch is important. But, my son graduated from MIT, which is, obviously the next step beyond IIT on a global scale. And he's doing computer science and doing all the things, artificial intelligence and all of that. So I think, clearly, uh, 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 engineering is where a lot of the cutting edge technological change happens. But whether it's my son's experience with his startup or whether it is some of the alternative energy industry that we are involved with as we have an energy transition fund, they all need money, and they all need somebody who can evaluate with an understanding of their kind of their opportunities and their risks and their uh, and so having financial people who are able to both understand the technological but also understand the real world issues, which doesn't necessarily require an engineering degree. There are a lot of people in finance who are very successful who come from a liberal arts background, may have done done literature or whatever. But I think that in finance I found my engineering background has never been a hindrance. It's always been a positive.
Happy to hear that. And before we get to the big canvas of India, America, investment, economy, let us get to the emotional side since you brought the reference of your son. Father's Day is not much far. So, the way you were receptive to the ideas and suggestions from your father, how do you see the next generation in terms of this equation and emotional bonding between father and son? Over a period of say 3 4 decades, if I say, with the arrival of social media and internet and explosion of information, how do you see this bridge? Has there been any change?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. My father was an engineer, and the reason I went to engineering is because he pushed me very hard to go into engineering. My son went into engineering, even though I didn't push him to go into engineering. It was his passion. So I think there is a change in the sense that our parents were well-meaning, and again, growing up middle class in India, your children to prosper. The two, and if they were good enough in academically to get into an IIT or get into medical school, then you definitely push them into those fields at that time. Today in the US, and I would say even in India, you're seeing that for children growing up in today's world, there are many more options. It is not as narrow anymore, and certainly in the US, for our children growing up, it is clearly not that narrow that engineering or or other professions. There are many choices of careers and professions. So I think I think the role that we play today, and I was growing up in a world of socialism, so the opportunities were limited, so the parents had to kind of point that out to our to the children to make sure that they went into the correct path so that their future was not spoiled. Today in the US, my children currently are not, but there are children who go work in politics. There are children who go work in law. There are children who go work in nonprofit. And our children are fortunate to grow up with, more plenty around them and growing up with plenty on their plate. So they have the luxury of choices. Therefore, the relationship that we have with our children is also different in the sense that our job becomes not to let them get spoiled by those choices, so as that they remain true to being giving it their best. And that, I think, is the thing that we as parents in today's day and age have to do, which is different than just making sure you get a job, you get good income, all that, good family, all that we were focused on today. But the challenge is bringing up children in a country like the US, with kids who've grown up going to, our kids went to private schools in New York. They had a lot handed to them on the platter, and the challenges are somewhat different. But therefore the dialogue is a little bit different.
I think you brought a very important point, and if we take this template and talk about India as a whole, there are much more choices that youth in India have now for multiple reasons. And you have been back and forth to India, and you also were recently moderating a panel where you were interacting with brilliant minds coming from health sector to IT to someone who has been economic advisor for India. So, how do you see the choices that India is making at this point? And many people look at India as a very important nation that is playing and is going to play a significant role on the global scene.
Well, I think India is clearly in a unique position for a number of reasons. Uh, and the reasons have to do with it has one of the best demographic. I know when I was growing up, having a large population used to be considered a bad thing. Today, having a large working age population is a rare thing because working age population is shrinking rapidly in Japan. It has been shrinking. It is about to shrink rapidly in China. It is shrinking in almost all of Western Europe, and even in the US. as the baby boomers retire, the number of people entering the workforce is lower than the number of people retiring. So that creates stresses on economic growth in a society when you have so few people to support so many people who are not working. In India, it is still the base of people who are entering the workforce is growing much faster than the people who are at the older generation. So therefore, India has an expanding workforce, which allows for significant economic opportunity. Now, that economic opportunity can be wasted if they don't have jobs. And here is where the challenge and the opportunity for India comes in. The challenge has been in the last few years, the last decade or so, job creation has been hard. There have been a lot of challenges. There was COVID, there were other factors that came into play. But the opportunity that is coming up, and I think the government is kind of laying some of the seeds for it, but also some other external factors have helped. The opportunity that has come is that as a manufacturing, which is where the large base, we have a large service industry to do IT. So jobs is manufacturing in most of the major Asian economies as they've developed rapidly. And India has missed that bus so far. But I think what is happening is that as China becomes less desired as a reliable sourcing partner for the West, countries are looking for opportunities. And India just happens to have hit the perfectly right moment. There is a demographic benefit. There's a lot of infrastructure that has been built in the last decade, whether it is the physical infrastructure of roads, highways, ports that have been upgraded, airports that are being upgraded, and now there's this major rail freight corridors between New Delhi and Mumbai and New Delhi and Calcutta, the north, the east, west, and these rail corridors, and all of these improve connectivity, and some actions taken by the government in terms of a PLI scheme to encourage investments, and you have some stability in government, so there is not the fear that the rules will change. I think things are starting to get to where also the Indian market. I mean, India has the cheapest data in the world, right? So you have, because of Reliance Jio's entry, data price have crashed. So it has the cheapest data in the world. You have number of smartphones, connectivity has improved, people's aspirations have improved as they've gotten access to that. So I'm talking about these multiplicity of things coming together. And not last but not the least is you have the best, and I'm a very important point, the best digital payment stack in the world. We have created through Nandan Nilekani and his team, and then Modi and his team have built on top of what Nandan built with the unique ID, with Aadhaar, and now with this UPI, Universal Payment Interface. You have huge amount of financial data, so and you have financial ability to reach the poorest in the country. So I think all of these are coming together. Manufacturing opportunities are opening up. A lot of the smartphones means that people are willing to locate smartphone manufacturing in India. People are willing to locate chip. I was talking to, Nivruti Rao, who was at the panel with me, and she was talking about the fact that part of the reason that companies like Intel, her company, or others are looking at India is, versus going to Vietnam, let's be clear, is that there's a large base market in India today for chips as smartphone and other things are coming in. And so that large base market plus the export opportunity is what makes India win versus Southeast Asian countries, which don't have that same large base market. So, we're in a competitive world. There's nothing that, other than that size that prevents companies from going to other Southeast Asian countries, or Southeast Asian countries instead of India. But India's size and its population, workforce, and and all of that. The one challenge in India, the one weakness in India, is that our education system doesn't provide enough training for the large number of jobs needed. And I think it's very important that we upgrade our skilling to meet the needs of what people are doing in China, and China's one area where it has done better is having a large workforce that can do these jobs. And I think India, that is, there's an infrastructure challenge, We have the people, but there's the people training properly challenge.
I think you touched the point that I wanted your attention on, but still we'll go a little deeper in terms of the role that education plays as far as individuals' growth and economic growth of a nation is concerned. The kind of education system that we have in good old days, like 3 4 decades ago, while I was studying, many of us were just happy becoming graduates. We were not having farsightedness about what we will do after becoming graduates. But I see things are changing. Many young minds nowadays have different aspirations, and they have more access to information through internet, and they explore, go in their own adventurous way. Yet the overall structure of education as it exists today, do you think there should be some change or some additional focused skill training, about which also Prime Minister Narendra Modi initially talked about, and in your panel also Dr. Narendra Trehan mentioned about having imparted some nursing oriented training
Hmm.
to 100,000 candidates, etc. But this demand of having skilled workforce will continue to grow, as you mentioned, or somebody in your panel mentioned, that every year we are adding almost the population of Australia to India. So this is going to be a growing appetite for jobs, etc. So put your 2 plus 2 from education, skills, job creation, and overall economy of India.
Absolutely. So, look, let me start with a basic explanation, specifically dive deep into it. Economic growth is driven by two factors at the most fundamental level. When we talk about GDP and all these things, we look at all this complicated, but let me uncomplicate it. Think of it as a factory, right? One thing that drives it is as you add more workers, that drives economic growth, and that is a demographic. But the other thing is as you drive skills, what is called productivity in economic terms. As you improve their productivity, so if you have the same number of workers, but if you can make them more productive, you can improve your output from a factory, and the same thing from an economy. So when you multiply the effect of more workers and improved skills, if you improve that, then your GDP can really accelerate. The sweet spot of GDP acceleration, which is economic growth, which is economic opportunity, which is livelihood, which is income for more and more people who enter the workforce. And I think part of the reason that one of the challenges in India, if you go visit, let's say, a plant in India manufacturing auto components or auto parts. I've been to Bharat Forge's plant in Pune. What you see is that it is highly automated. If you go to a similar plant in China, it is not as automated. Cost of labor in India is cheaper than cost of labor in China, but because labor productivity was so low, it's the cost. Its cost is not just how many dollars or rupees or yuan I'm paying per hour, but how many dollars for how much output I'm getting. And you were getting such low output in India that it made more sense to use automated machinery. You were getting such high output that you were willing to use the labor. So if our goal is not just to have the economy grow and some people at the top make all the money and the worker and the masses don't get taken along, then we have to do the skilling needed. And I think part of the challenge is that, when I graduated from IIT, there were 5 IITs. Today, there are something IITs. There are thousands of engineering colleges. There used to be a few regional engineering colleges, and that was it. Today, there are thousands of engineering colleges that have opened up. There are a lot of educational institutions that have opened up, but once you get past the pyramid of the top, there's a lot of money-making engineering opportunity. I mean, colleges which are not necessarily training people appropriately. But also a lot of the blue collar jobs don't need college graduates. They need people trained. So just like Dr. Trehan talked about, nurse skilling, Pratham does things, trains people for hospitality, for working in hotels, trains people in welding and other skills to go work in construction, trains people in nursing to work as nursing assistants. All of these things are needed. But I think the manufacturing side, we and others, there are companies that do it for profit, are all trying to solve the skilling problem, because this is not a problem that comes top down from the central government. This is all of our problem. So the central government is providing some skilling related, you know, benefits and incentives to that, you skill a 18-year-old. You also have to make sure, which is where Pratham, and I'm doing a little, commercial here for Pratham, is that, at the third, fourth, fifth standard and, those grades, making sure that children have the right uh, basic reading, writing, arithmetic skills. Because when you go to all these things, even if you're doing, welding or you're doing whatever, to be able to do things, understand things, whatever, having some basic understanding is important. So I think the whole education system has come a long way, but it's not where it needs to be to meet the challenges of the modern manufacturing. If you're going to build, you know, Apple cell phones and chips and, and cars to supply the world, and now electric scooters and electric cars, and, all of these things are coming. The skill set needed, we have to keep improving our game.
So there are multiple issues which, even in an individual's life, have their say, and especially when we talk about a country like India, there is bound to be a spectrum of issues. But if I ask you a long question, I request you to briefly respond to that. That relates to job creation. So one, government will have policies which would help the big business grow, because growth is happening at a scale which you would not see in other ways, and that encouragement should be there. But at the same time, in what way government can work without being too much involved in the day-to-day affairs of economy, uh, to empower creation of small business enterprise entrepreneurs are encouraged, because both would complement each other in terms of having a faster pace of job creation. Uh, do you see something happening in that direction? And I hear some of the executives from the corporate world are quite excited and hopeful, and some are not. Where are you?
I am hopeful, but I think, part of it is Indian government needs to do more in doing less. What do I mean by that? The problem in India is you need too many approvals. There are too many bureaucrats who, we say in India, "Tang aate hain," right? In any project, when you're in India, it's not easy. If you go to China or you go to Vietnam, the process, as companies will tell you, is much straightforward. The government is behind you. They're clearing things. I mean, Tesla started its plant in Shanghai from start to finish manufacturing in less than 1 year, 9 or 10 months. You know, in India, they'll be lucky to do it in 9 years, right? That is the problem. Our challenge is we have to figure out how do we make the government to be a helpful and not a hindrance. And
So,
and so I think that's the biggest challenge is simplifying the labor laws, simplifying the land acquisition laws, while being fair to the people. You can't ride roughshod over the people, but in a way that is a win-win, because job creation is also pro people, right?
So what you said also reminds me of the phrase which I heard from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, that we want to remove red tapeism and we want to have red carpet for the foreign investors or those who want to do business. And there has been a lot of reference about ease of doing business in India. But now let's fast forward for now and jump to the important event of global proportion that is happening. I hear nearly 7,000 people would be joining for a special dinner hosted in honor of Prime Minister Narendra Modi during his official visit at White House in June 22nd, etc. So, mm considering the increased understanding between India and USA on many layers at the moment. How do you see this playing out for Indian economy, as well as how America is likely to gain from uh, this uh, better friendship between the two nations?
Well, look, state dinners are symbolic, but symbolic symbolism can sometimes be important. I mean, so I think there was a state dinner that uh, uh, George W. Bush held for Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and so we've had state dinners before. I was in. I think an even more important event was Prime Minister Modi. I think it was in 2016, or maybe it was 2015. I attended when he spoke to the joint session of Congress. That's an even more rare honor.
Yeah,
State
he'll be
dinners
doing that
happen.
again. Yeah, yeah, he'll be
Yeah,
doing
so
that.
that's a more even more rare honor than state dinners. So I think what is important is that there is a clear understanding that India is a critical partner, despite the disagreements on Russia, where India continues to buy oil, from Russia, and Russia is a major arms supplier. This is a sign of a depth of relationship that on that one area we can agree to disagree, and yet we are able to see that the friendship is deep enough that we are seeing more and more hurdles removed, right? Because there were hurdles on you can't export this technology to India because it's not on an approved list. So now companies can set up chip manufacturing. You can set up all kinds of advanced technology plants manufacturing in India, and the U.S. is happy to encourage it. All of these state dinners and all are signs of underlying that positive. Business leaders are clear that long term they made a big bet on China 20, 25 years ago. Now they're understanding that despite whatever disagreements may happen on minor issues, this is a relationship that they can count on for the next 20 to 10, 20 years, because in businesses have to make long-term investment decisions. And so these are all signs that the relationship has moved to a new level where making long-term investment decisions, of billions and tens of billions of dollars, people feel good that that's something is not going to come along and change that in the near future. I mean, we can never say never, but it's a very reasonable bet that India is going to be a long-term ally.
Indeed. So, long-term ally and relationship between India and America, and your and my presence here in America, and having a lot of our focus on what is happening in India, um, proves that the saying "you can take an Indian out of India, but you cannot take India out of the heart of an Indian" is true. And I think Indian American community is also quite active and playing an important role in American politics. That also somewhere sort of complements the efforts of Indian government. And as we conclude, one point that makes you very very hopeful about India's growth journey at this point in 30 seconds.
I think it's one of those rare occasions where everything is confluence of things is coming together to create the India. And that's rare, internal, external, all are coming together.
Wonderful. So that's energy and sort of, as they say in musical terms, the final sum or the perfect harmony. Much more needs to be done to reach there, but just looking at the ideal situation, may there be peace within India as well as in the world. And such a pleasure talking to you, Arvindji, with lots of good
It's our
wishes.
pleasure.
Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaste.